the meeting to order. 12:05 here. As Carrie mentioned, there's not really a formal agenda because this meeting has been repurposed. So I'm handing it right back over to you, Carrie and Kyra.
Thank you for that. So we are now at, I think, meeting 3 to talk about this. We have been having discussion around updating our state service plan, just to bring everybody up to speed again. Our state service plan is a federally required plan. It is basically our state's vision for supporting and expanding and promoting volunteerism, national service, and civic engagement. There is no requirement for how long or short it must be, but it must exist. We basically have an expiring plan. We have talked so far about kind of where we've made progress and where we haven't. Most of the progress that we've made has been pretty amazing. We have done a lot to reduce barriers to service. We've increased a lot of capacity in various areas, done a lot of training, a lot of partnership building. We've brought in some private grants, but we've had some areas of our own barriers, primarily due where we've not been able to enact quite a few things, primarily due to low capacity, not being able to get new positions, not having success with um, past legislative sessions asking for additional funding or position authority. So that has kind of kept us, from being able to maybe continue into those next steps and broaden our work or increase our partnerships and meet some of our statutory responsibilities, mostly around things like our volunteerism and civic engagement work, and really growing, I think, like our private funding, growing some of our partnerships and service programs across the state. Um, we Due to the past kind of federal elections and everything else that's been going on, it's been a little wonky trying to develop the state service plan. We typically meet in person. We'll have sometimes a couple of days retreat and so forth. But um, as we were getting this developed, were notified due to, as I know you all are aware, the budget shortcomings for the state, that we're not traveling. We're not getting travel approved. We're not getting in person, meetings approved and large contracts approved. And so we looked at just how do we make sure we can have something to rally around, some sort of guide for next year, meet the requirement to have our state service plan in place. Typically, what it hasn't been a real there hasn't been a ton of focus from the federal agency on that, but we're in a landscape or environment right now where we want to make sure we don't have any low hanging fruit for compliance issues, because we don't know what's going to be looked at, as important or not in the future. But also, how do we do this in a way that we're not dishonoring our typical ethos of doing a lot of public engagement and public input? We need to update, we need to do a bit of an update, but we also don't want to do a huge update that isn't taking into account our typical, community engagement process. So our focus has been, what could we do to refresh what we currently have? Do maybe a 1-year addendum, which is a very common thing happening with other commissions in the current circumstances. So do a little bit of a refresh, but also kind of stay a little bit in the same avenue of what our current plan is, to just, give us an idea of what to do for this next year. And I think the one thing I forgot to mention is that we decided to do just this kind of 1-year thing because it feels a little maybe not the best idea to do a 3-year plan in the current sort of very frequently changing, evolving landscape of the federal administration and service and state and things like that right now. So that's where we're at. Um, we in our last couple of sessions had some conversation around where there are some existing legislative concepts that maybe we could kind of support or get behind rather than doing a new one, because it is a very fast process. Or maybe there's some that we just, since the deadline to kind of submit even basic drafts is the end of this year, maybe we just think about some more long-term things, or maybe we think about what might be like more internal policy, or maybe we think about just private funding and things like that to support the work we're doing. So that's kind of the framing. There's nothing that says we have to do a legislative concept. But we do want to think about policy and funding and things like that. Kyra's going to facilitate some of that, kind of pose some questions to you all later on that to hear what your thoughts are, and start building around that. In the meantime, I've done two things. I followed up on a request at the last meeting to do a crosswalk amongst with all the kind of other plans that are adjacent to us. And then I took some of the feedback I was hearing, and put together a little bit of maybe like a potential draft of updated goals. Um, and so that's what I'm going to jump into if there are not any questions on anything else that I just said. And I'll give the context that the reason I invited others that we work with here in the agency, that are involved in our youth mental and behavioral health cohort and implementation of that, is because that is something that we do, that is privately funded. We want to grow that. We want to take that into context of where we might continue to build off that, and think about how that and other work is one of the ways that we could fulfill a role for addressing governor priorities around workforce development, service to career, things like that, and partner with other entities. So we thought that it would be good to have their perspective here. So otherwise, I'm going to jump into my slides. Okay, I just clicked on a lot of stuff. What am I doing? Okay. So if you could just verbalize out loud somebody that you're seeing the crosswalk document right now.
Yes, Carrie.
Great, thank you.
Assuming that the crosswalk looks like a graph
Looks
with a lot
like
of columns and okay.
AmeriCorps, Ask, Hack, etc.
Yes.
Yes. Um, Okay, so I think it was Susan actually who had asked for this, and unfortunately she can't come, but she did send me an email and said, "Thank you. This hit the spot of what I was looking for." So just to give a little bit of background on this, Oregon serves obviously as a state service commission. We have our own state service plan, but then we also are an AmeriCorps program. So we think about how we align with the AmeriCorps state service plan. We also, are a member of our the best association ever, ever, ever that I've ever worked with, Ask, America's Service Commissions, that Kyra is executive director of. They have their own strategic plan, which is nice to figure out where we might align with that, or where, it sort of partners with ours. Then we're located within the HEC, right? And they have a strategic plan. WTDB is also within the HAC and within our Department of the Office of Workforce Investments, and also have a strategic plan. That is specific to workforce. HAC, I would say, is specific, covers workforce and learners, but I think it leans really heavy on learners and education. Ask obviously thinks about sort of their operations, but also their, the greater service network, the commission network, state service commission network, et cetera. And then AmeriCorps is focused specifically on national service and volunteerism and whatnot. So it seems like maybe it would be an easy endeavor to say, oh, there's all of these like common threads, but it's actually kind of challenging to figure out like where any of this lines up, because like it's all adjacent, it touches, but everybody kind of has their own unique role, right? So this is what I pulled together. Essentially, I took the focus areas, the main ones, and I didn't put the goal 5 on here, which is specific to seniors in service, just because that is just very specifically its own thing. And there wasn't really, that's not really where I saw alignment. I think that is covered, the alignment is covered in the other ones. But just want to mention, I didn't forget that we have goal 5. So our focus areas altogether are strengthen impacts of service, engage Oregonians in making a difference, fostering ready, resilient communities, and positioning commission as a leader in service. The strength and impacts of service has really been focused on reducing barriers, providing, more training and education for grantees so that they have successful program implementation, looking at like increasing member benefits so that they, there's no barriers that prevents them from both like starting service and completing their year of service, right, and benefiting from it. A lot of focus on, raising awareness of those grant opportunities and so forth. The Engage Oregonians in making a difference for us has really been like the volunteerism and civic engagement based goal, and is also the one that holds things like, um, our the statewide recruitment database or the governor's volunteer awards, the civic health index, and that's one that I reported out that we may have made the least amount of progress on. We've not been able to get that position to do that work, both through applying for AmeriCorps funding and positions within the state system. Foster ready and resilient communities for us at the time has been really focused on disaster services and emergency response, related to our role within the state's emergency response plan, to coordinate to coordinate resources, distribution of resources, developing resources, and so things like the ORVID system, the Oregon Volunteers in Disaster, that recruitment and volunteer management system, and then training and deploying national service members, AmeriCorps members, when they're during times of disaster and crisis. And then position commission as a leader in service has really been about increasing our engagement with public officials, increasing our funding, increasing our staffing and capacity, and raising awareness, a lot more marketing, partnership building, outreach, etc. So taking that into account, I looked across the board at these different strategic plans and kind of pulled out where I thought the themes existed. Um, this is not, I don't, it's not, this is not prescriptive. I didn't have a goal putting this together saying this should mean this and result in this action for us at all. I was asked to provide this as sort of an informational thing to sort of give an overview to kind of, see like where we sit within, this ecosystem of our partners, our main partners, both because like our funders or primary partners for our work, our department mates and whatnot. Um, and then took some time to just sort of say like what's kind of unique for us. Like maybe these are some of the things that are common, or what the focuses are, but what's kind of unique for us. I am not going to completely go over this. What I thought is just maybe I would let you all can look at it for a few minutes. I'll stop talking and let you look at it for a few minutes and then just see if you have any questions before I go over the other slide. So that starts now.
Um, this is Latrissa over here, Carrie.
Yes.
Um, so one question I would have, I think this is great, by the way. So it's very
Okay, I'm
helpful,
glad it's helpful.
yeah, in seeing, what the different groups are and where their roles are. Just wondering on that, seemed to me the service to career pathway is a pretty unique. No one's really doing that. But I'm just wondering because of the crossover with especially HEC and the other workforce group, if there's really, is there awareness that that is a unique role for this organization? Some of this is how others also these other groups perceive some of these things. And if they're thinking they're doing it too, then that causes issues. So I was just wondering, in that one especially, there seemed to be some potential overlap.
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. I do not think that, I mean, there's awareness of that we do national service. There's awareness that we have gotten grants for service to career pathway development work. Do I think that there's enough awareness and or recognition of the fact that national service is a workforce pathway?
Mhm.
Or an education pathway? No, not even remotely. I would say that that's a huge area of continued opportunity for us. We've been at the HEC for 8 years, and that still continues to be a challenge for people to, I think, see our impact there. I send out the education award data every year of how much money AmeriCorps members are earning and putting into university and colleges in Oregon. Um, I send out data around, AmeriCorps service to jobs pathways. And I still think we sort of claw our way into those conversations or have to kind of say, hey, don't forget us, bring us into these conversations. So I think that is a very unique role for us that as much as we have done a lot of awareness around it, there's still Dr. Luttrell, I still think that the hang up is like that people can't let go of AmeriCorps as a gap year opportunity.
Yep, yep.
No
I think
matter what I am trying to
what you
promote,
try to
no
do.
matter what we're telling them, no matter what data we're giving them, no matter what, I think it's getting better. I definitely think it's getting better, but it's not where we want it to be. And I
Right.
often hear people talk about young adults and career pipelines and then not, and say, hey, by the way, we're actually doing this thing you just talked about. You're saying you want to do it. We are doing it. Let's partner. Let's not duplicate. Let's not silo. So that is a continuing issue. Does that answer your question?
It does. Well, I'm just wondering about that workforce committee and whether, because I think that would be probably the place where this overlap probably is the most extreme, right? Of
The WTDB.
yep, yep.
Yeah, that's the governor's workforce and talent development board, and that's basically that board that has a lot of like the business persons and university and college representatives on it. And it's interesting because it is very solid work to the rest of us, but we're all kind of working to break that down. But when Jeremy and Madeline and I were in Salt Lake City for the National Governors Association Service to Career Pathway cohort, of which we're a member of that. We heard from some others where they actually facing the same issue did a lot of work to actually have that become statute, that they are that a representative from the State Service Commission is a designated member of the Workforce Talent and Development Board. So that was actually a statutory technical fix for them.
That would be a good idea.
So yeah, we should bookmark that as one of those
Yeah,
things
totally.
that's
Well,
really
because
good.
at the very least, then you would have eyes on discussions and ways to bring up, well, wait a minute, we're already working on this. Because I think that's where duplication definitely can be happening and not recognition. And so then you're always chasing that to try to find out what happened there or what they are working on when, it just doesn't make sense to me. We should just be on that somehow, you or someone.
Absolutely.
My view, just knowing how these things work.
Well, I appreciate your view. I mean, being in the education system, like, and also like your experience and background is so strong in like the certification piece and the credentialing and the like education for workforce attainment and so forth.
Thank you. Well, and I think that, even though this is a very challenging time for us, education wise, with what's going on at the federal level, there also is a lot of discussion now about workforce. And there are going to be more grants through the Department of Labor, from what I understand, relating to workforce and trying to figure out ways to be supporting that in different ways. And so I think that there's going to be more attention focused on that. So that will be an area that, if the group wants to, may be worthwhile connecting better on.
For sure.
That's a great perspective that you bring, and it reminds me of a goal that I know you, Carrie, have that you've mentioned a number of times, and that is cross collaboration between this commission and other commissions.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
like I know that you've talked about an ideal world in which there are people on this commission who serve on other related commissions, sort of as an ad hoc or an at-large position, and then vice versa for some of those folks on this committee or on this board. And I think there's something there as it relates to this sort of addendum service plan that we're talking about as um, stabilizing where we are right now and like really digging our roots in deep, so that people feel stable in this crisis moment. I sort of lost the thread of what I was saying at the end of that sentence, but I think you all understood what I was saying. Do we have any other questions or comments for Carrie on this slide right now before she moves on? Seeing nothing, go ahead, Carrie, and what do you got next for us?
So next, again, this is just very draft, very there to play with. Not necessarily my recommendation, but pulling together just a lot of themes that people talked about. I and not wanting to stray too far from our original plan, but also like refresh, hone it, narrow it down, and look at things that would be both building on what we're already doing, where we already have some footholds, where we likely could get like increased funding, or where we're already talking about this with others, or just looking at like what's achievable, what could actually we could hit a spot where we um, achieve, what means done for something like this. I put together this draft. Again, it doesn't. I think it does summarize what's been talked about, but also I just think it's easier to have something to pick apart rather than starting from scratch. So this may not be where we fully land, but it could be something to work with. I narrowed down the areas of focus to strengthening service, which is really important right now, to engaging Oregonians in service volunteerism and civic life. I think that this is a great time to get involved in that. I think people are looking to get more civically involved with what's going on, but this is again a very, very specific role that only we have. Um, Also foster resilient, climate ready, and connected communities. Sidebar, some of these words would not also stay in a final version, like climate. We'd probably say natural resource sustainability, or things like that. But because we have to be cautious of that some of the words that we know don't land at the federal level. But I picked these three because, and again, we would still have our senior goal, but I picked these three because I thought that they were more indicative of sort of like the theme that we're on right now, is that we want to think about resiliency. We want to talk about strengthening what we currently do. We want to engage more, have more champions, and also really lean into our unique role of having more people involved. But we're really thinking about like sustainability, right? We know that we want to dig further into supporting governor priorities in areas that we see as being priority areas that there's additional state or federal funding or even private funding opportunities for. And so that's why I narrowed it down to these three. I set this up to look at context, our role, and then strategies basically. And so for strength and impacts of service, essentially identifying needs, priority populations where high quality service can move income or outcomes. Um, we are doing further work on, a shared data language. And so I thought this was a good area to think about recognizing that work, recognizing the work we're already starting to, do more data analysis and have sort of a shared language for that, where it's not the case that we're often measuring things that the HEC is reporting on or others are reporting on, but we do it in such a different way that the work we're doing isn't really getting as represented as it could or as promoted as it could. So thinking about developing common measures and shared reporting so that we can really um, you know, provide more information about our impacts. And then just, yeah, the levers, shared reporting tools, more education on that, guidance on common data so that we can improve performance, but also, again, like show our impact. Engaging Oregonians in service is pretty self-explanatory. Again, like defining who's not being reached, who isn't able to, participate, where we could increase opportunities and what those needs are, those resource needs are. And then just leading efforts to expand service, civic participation, and volunteer recognition. These are all things that are in our statute. And In this case, I really thought more about leaning into, the information we have around like the Civic Health Index, really leaning more into, the schools and national service program, utilizing that as a resource and so forth, launching the Get Connected database. And then foster resilient, climate ready, and connected communities. I thought around how that resiliency, that sustainability really lines up with opportunities that are there for us to further support the climate action work of the state. As we mentioned during the last meeting, the governor just last month put out a new messaging reminding state agencies that are under executive order to develop climate action plans to step up their work. And I think that that's a great place for us to plug in and think about having state-based AmeriCorps programs and developing a workforce pathway. We also are already doing that mental health, behavioral health work, and that is very much about connection, about resiliency, about sustainability. And just sort of like further leaning into that. It does align, as I said, with a lot of other priorities, with workforce development, with the governor's priorities, with what private funders want to support. And so I think that it, again, gives us some places to rally around, some fresh ideas around that, but also is really kind of building on what we're already doing and not making this like too out there that we couldn't achieve it. So that's just a basic start. I don't know if you want to have any questions. We don't have to talk about it too long. It's up to you. We can circle back to it, or I definitely want to follow up and send it out as well to the rest of the commission for feedback, to the rest of our staff, to the rest of the state cohort team, and so forth. It's up to you all if you really want to dig into it a little bit more now, or kind of sit on it, go maybe to Kyra's piece, and then you just have this as kind of a framing thing in the background.
I think if anybody has any immediate burning questions or comments, we can bring that up now, but otherwise, you can send it out, people can peruse it, and we'll move on to Kyra. Does anybody have any burning thoughts, questions about this document here that we're seeing? Okay, Carrie will send it out and we'll all take a look at it. Carrie,
And
is
I'll
that
continue to sort of like wordsmith as we
right?
even have like this conversation now. And we'll be wordsmithing it for a little while, but that was kind of more like the first draft. So
Yeah, it's a great first draft, Carrie. Thank you. I see the feedback that we all have given over the last couple of sessions reflected in that. So thank you for getting that started. Kyra, I believe I'm handing the microphone over to you, my friend.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sierra. And thanks everyone for joining the meeting today. So as Carrie mentioned at the onset of the call, I am here to talk a little bit about public policy, specifically state public policy, although I am going to give a bit of an update on some federal public policy that we are expecting to see here soon. And just as a way to kind of just talk about what we're seeing on the state public policy front with other commissions across the country, just to hopefully be kind of a source of inspiration, and then have some discussion about some of the ideas that you may have moving forward related to state legislation as well, that you may want to put into pursue and or think about developing relationships with legislators that might wish to actually introduce introduce something on the commission's behalf. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Give my computer just a second here. It has been a long week for the computers, so it's a little bit slow on Friday afternoon.
we just got notice too that yeah, the internet is down again at that building, the Heck building. There's like fiber outage or something. So good times.
That's not fun. So, so as I mentioned, I wanted to just start the conversation about state policy with a preview of legislation that we are expecting that is going to be introduced in the Senate anytime now. Probably now will be after the first of the year. But I think it's just important to kind of know that this is on its way. Now, if it actually moves is a whole different conversation. But just as you're thinking about state policy on things that you might want to be pursuing related to that. So the Promoting Service Through AmeriCorps Act, or PSA Act, was introduced last September 2024, by Senators Cassidy of Louisiana and Senator Coons of Delaware. So both of those senators, they are the co-chairs of the National Service Caucus in Congress. So these are, on the Senate side, they are leading policy efforts related to national service and AmeriCorps. There's also a House version of the National Service Caucus as well. And so again, this is idea of really trying to position service as one of the few remaining bipartisan issues, right, that are out there. And so this legislation was actually introduced in September of 2024 to honor the 30th anniversary of AmeriCorps. And it's really to be considered a mini reauthorization bill. So the last time that the AmeriCorps agency and all of its programs were authorized officially was via the Serve America Act, which was in 2009. So the national service laws are currently not authorized. They get an annual authorization in theory through the annual appropriations process. But actually having a policy reauthorization would be very, very beneficial. And one of the things that is important to note about this too, because some people have asked us, why are the senators wanting to pursue this now? Is it a good idea for AmeriCorps to be putting its head up above water right now, given everything that's happened over the course of the past year? One of the considerations for the senators is, again, kind of that bipartisan piece that I mentioned about this idea of really showing that, hey, there are some things that we can work on across the aisle together on, and they see national service as part of that. The other piece is that earlier in the year, there was discussion that when Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, was going around and looking at agencies and programs that they wanted to severely cut or eliminate altogether, it was targeted that they were going to be looking at agencies and programs that were not authorized. And so part of the thinking too for the senators right now is that if we could get a reauthorization bill through, even if it's a small one, that would also just put the agency in better shape and consideration for moving forward. So again, how much that would actually make a difference, hard to say. But that's also just part of the thinking here too, is to kind of basically give, show that Congress is supportive of the work of the agency and state service commissions. And so therefore we should be moving forward on that. We, as your association, have been working with Voices for National Service to provide technical expertise for the reintroduction of this bill. And that's been particularly important because the Office of the Inspector General has put forward a number of proposals for consideration to the senators that we actually think would be quite detrimental to AmeriCorps. That's not the OIG's intent, but they have a lack of understanding, in our opinion, regarding how AmeriCorps really works on the ground, and they don't realize that some of the things they're proposing would actually undermine it rather than adding helping. So again, something that we're really working through right now, and there's back and forth negotiations going on. I will say that we have communicated our concerns and our interests to both of the senators and their teams, and there's commitment on their part that if we as a field don't believe whatever is going to be introduced is going to be beneficial and not harmful, then they actually will not introduce it. So we're kind of in that process right now of trying to get that language ironed out in a way that we think will, again, not be harmful to the field. So a few things just to be aware of that were in the 2024 version of the PSA Act, and many of these pieces are included in the draft at this point in time, although they may change slightly. But I wanted to kind of give you an idea of kind of some of the provisions that we saw. Creating a full-time 1,500-hour position for AmeriCorps, so something between the 1,700 full-time piece that we have now and the 1,200 that we often see in academic programs. Granting administrative costs raised to 10%. Right now they're 5%. It is in conversations that we've had with congressional staffers. It looks like we're not going to go up to the 10% again. We probably will go more to like 7 or 8. But again, there would be an increase in administrative cost allowances. The unobligated expense reserve fund. This would allow the AmeriCorps agency to hold on to money that it has not obligated before the end of the federal fiscal year for specific purposes, such as investing in technology. So that's like a really important part that, again, otherwise they would have to turn that money back over to the Treasury. Senator Coons in particular is very, very passionate about alumni engagement. And so that would create an Office of Alumni Engagement. It's likely because right now the discussion in Congress is not wanting to stand up what would be perceived as new bureaucracy, that there's probably not officially going to be an office called for, but that there would be that alumni engagement would be a priority for the AmeriCorps agency moving forward, and they would determine how best to meet that priority. Member experience here. So a number of pieces here. So education award transfer and discounted award limit. So that would allow, there are provisions right now relating to the transfer of education awards. For someone who serves that's 55 or older, they can pass it on to a family member. But this basically would lift that age cap. So anybody you could serve, in your mid 20s. And if you want to transfer it to somebody else, then by all means, you can do that as well. So lifting the age limit. Using the education award more specifically for credentials and apprenticeship programming, and being able to have a longer period of time to utilize the education award. Now, in our conversations this year, it's likely actually that they're going to talk about reducing the amount of time from 7 years that you can utilize the education award. And this is related to audit issues that the AmeriCorps agency continues to have. And part of that is because they're holding all that education award money on their books for many, many, many years. And so wanting to kind of help clean up on that. Increasing the education award limit to 4 full-time equivalent education awards, so people could serve more than what they can now. Enabling cash in lieu of the education award. So for Vistas, they actually at the end of their term of service, they can get the education award, or they can get a cash payment. So this would allow that to be the case across all AmeriCorps programs, not just for Vista. And then also to offering non-competitive hiring eligibility at the federal level for individuals who serve. So there's these are some of the things that we saw in the 2024 version of the Act. Again, we're expecting that some variation of these pieces will be in the new reintroduced version of the Act. But again, exactly what they're going to look like, they're still kind of in a negotiation right now. The one thing I will just flag as well, and again, I don't know how this is going to land, but as I mentioned, there's conversation about reducing the access to the education award from 7 years downward a little bit. Another thing that was being discussed was, and we've pushed back pretty hard on this, is that after 1 year, you had to transfer the education award into a 529 account. That would not be an option, that would be a requirement. And we just felt generally that, access to 529 plans, that is not universal, certainly. And it's another complication. So we said that, we would support a concept where you could transfer your education award into a 529 plan if you so choose, but not that you'd be required to do so. So we'll have to see where they end up on that. Again, I think that, the idea that 529 plans are prevalent enough across the country, I think is really misguided. And I think actually will limit access as well. So, again, 529 is a great or mechanism, but again, it's not for everybody. And so just wanting to be aware of that. So just again, want to kind of give that federal context as you were thinking about what you all might want to be pursuing at the state level. So just a couple of other things to be aware of about kind of the role that ASK plays in helping to support state level public policy. So we do have a state service caucus, and our state service caucus is kind of modeled on the National Service Caucus in Congress, but this is specifically for state legislators. So we basically bring them together quarterly virtually, and we talk about different legislative concepts that they might want to pursue related to service in their particular state. And a number of our state service caucus members have actually introduced service-oriented legislation that they kind of heard about from us. And I'm going to talk about some of that legislation here in a moment, but just something to be thinking about too, as you will potentially pursuing any type of things legislatively. How can we get members of the Oregon legislature involved in the state service caucus and really kind of help provide some inspiration for them about the types of things that they could be pursuing as well. Also, too, we track state legislation across the country that's introduced related to service. And then we also support commissions in their pursuit of state legislation. So depending on whether it's the proposals like that you all would be doing if you were going up through the hack for introduction, or if there are technical assistance that we can provide to legislators related to legislation, et cetera, whatever that might look like for that particular state, we stand in a position to help with that. And then something else too to be aware of, that is an effort that we launched in partnership with Service Air Alliance this fall, is the Center for State Service Innovation. So this is a multi-year effort that is being funded by the Carnegie Corporation and Einhorn Collaborative, both large-scale New York-based funders. And with this, the participating states in the first cohort will get targeted support to advance a policy and/or funding goal in their upcoming legislative session. So for some states, that means that they're looking to maybe hire a lobbyist for PISA. For example, in California, as you may know, there's been hundreds of millions of dollars in state funding that's poured into the commission over the last several years under Governor Newsom's leadership, but we're in a place where he actually terms out of office next year, and there really was a desire to make sure that we're holding on to as much of that money in the California budget as possible moving forward. So in California, for example, a lobbying effort's going to be underway in order to work with legislators to help them understand the impacts of those investments, and also to how they can continue that beyond Governor Newsom's term in office. So again, each state is a little bit different on what they're going to be focused on, but the grant funds help to pay for things like lobbyists as necessary. So that's something to be thinking about too for the future, that maybe that is something that we would want, something you all might want to be interested in pursuing as well as an opportunity down the road. So let's see here. So then moving on. So policy ideas. So we have a number of resources and toolkits that we have put together about various legislative concepts, which you all have kind of access to. We don't have a toolkit for each of these per se, but for many of them, we do have kind of resources about what this could look like. But some of the ideas that have been banded around the country over the last several years, state funded climate corps programming. So these sometimes will be in coordination with AmeriCorps or separate, but the idea being that the state is putting in money to launch a climate corps effort. We typically are seeing that type of programming happening in states that may not have a strong local conservation corps network, but this is a way to kind of trying to step into that green space. And that was a lot of discussion was happening around this, particularly in the previous administration. Obviously, when the American Climate Corps, when President Trump retook office, that was all shut down at that point in time. But again, there are still some states, particularly in blue states, that are pursuing state-funded climate corps. Other state-funded service corps that could be issue specific, so an education corps, a public health corps, things of that nature, where again, there's an opportunity to fund it with the state level. It could be commingled appropriately with federal dollars as well, but the idea of kind of these very state-based corps that are being created. Workforce Commission. So Carrie talked a little bit about how some of your colleagues around the country, how they have been getting commission folks represented on their workforce commissions or the workforce boards, and what that might look like. And also specifically in New Hampshire, they actually had legislation where they created a new youth workforce oriented commission that was really thinking about service as an entry point for individuals as well. Home sharing incentives. So there was actually legislation about this in Oregon. Some of you may remember a couple of years ago with this idea of that if individuals were opening up their home in order to help with affordable housing, that then they would get tax incentives as part of that. That actually was well received, particularly by Republicans in the legislature. It didn't end up going anywhere, unfortunately, but I do think that that's something where, Oregon's kind of took the lead on that a couple of years ago. Even there's been a lot of conversation about home sharing, but the idea of actually introducing legislation to incentivize it, I think was really interesting. School district recruitment incentives. So in some states, not all states, but in some states, it's my understanding that high schools in particular, they get funding to help incentivize recruitment, like for example, for the military positions, for other kind of opportunities in that regard. And and so there was talk about actually, specifically this was in Texas, about trying to provide some incentives to school districts to basically talk more about AmeriCorps National Service opportunities, as well as a way to really increase awareness amongst high school age youth. Alumni hiring preferences. So several states currently have hiring preferences for alumni, similar to a veteran's preference as well. But for anyone that served in a national service position, they could, if they were going to the state for a position, they actually would get some preference there because of their AmeriCorps service. Removal of state income tax on the education award. So again, that's one of the things that we know that alums are often surprised when they utilize their education award, and then when it's tax time that they have to pay income tax on the education award. And so that's something that we for sure, that we've seen a number of states across the country do this. Removal of state income tax on the living allowance. So no one has pulled this off yet, although we do have a toolkit around it, because I think it's a really promising. But we do think that Minnesota is going to try to make a run at this in 2026 and see if they can actually pull that off, because I think that would just be really, really amazing. Match for the education award. So this would be, again, state match for the education award. So for example, in California, if you're a full-time AmeriCorps member, you actually get up to $10,000 for your education award. So basically they're throwing in $3,000 in match out of state coffers for that as well. Creating a commission foundation. So they, for some states where they're not able to accept private dollars, creating a foundation that's adjacent to the commission is an opportunity for them to receive grants and or fundraise in the private sector. State retirement buy-in. So in a few states, if you do a year of service and then you go into state service, you can actually buy a year of retirement credit in the state's retirement system for your year of service. So it's a way to bump up the number of years that you're in the state retirement system. So that's something, for example, I worked on that when I was in California, that we were able to do that. Workforce development. So just again, kind of this idea of the service to workforce pathway work that you all are involved in, also looking at alignment of pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeships as well. And how do we think about that cohesively and seamlessly as well. In-state tuition for those who serve and or preferential admission. So Arizona was the first state to do this probably about 10 years ago, and there's several that have followed suit here. But basically, if you do a year of service in Arizona, then you automatically you qualify for in-state tuition, even if you came from out of state. And so that's something that's very, advantageous. And certainly with Arizona State University being one of the largest public institutions in the country, the fact that that is, part of something that they actually advertise when people are applying to the university. And then some places there's more, it's not necessarily in-state tuition, but it's preferential admission into the university if you've done a year of service or more. The other thing I would just note too is that in most states where this has been done, the in-state tuition piece, you actually have to serve in that state in order to get that eligibility, except in Nebraska. In Nebraska, you could have done your service in Oregon and you decide you want to go to University of Nebraska-Lincoln. They're like, okay, great, you come, kind of thing, and we'll give you in-state tuition because you've done a year of service. So they are unique in that, but that is something that we do see in Nebraska. And then tuition waivers for each year of service. So this has primarily been done in West Virginia, although others are looking at it. So basically for each year of service that you do, you get tuition waivers and with West Virginia public institutions as well. So this idea of rather than, giving you in-state tuition, it's actually going a step further. And part of that here too, in the states where we're seeing this is that there's a lot of youth exodus or exits, excuse me, and they want to basically try to keep their young people in state. And so incentivizing them to do that is part of the strategy to kind of not have all of the youth flight that we see in some other states too. So these are some of the ideas that have been considered, bantered around. There's other pieces as well, but kind of these are some kind of the big categories of stuff that we've seen other commissions think about, or other, or legislators think about. And then just to kind of give you a sense of the traffic here on all of this. So in 2025, so this legislative session, for most states, the 2025 year is the long year, right? And often the even years are the shorter sessions type of thing. But there was quite a bit of legislation that was been introduced. Not all of it obviously made it through the process, which is not surprising. I mean, I think as we all know, like legislatively, the idea that legislation gets through on its first introduction is not very common, right? But at the same time, there's some stuff, but people can continue to reintroduce some of these ideas as well. So I think the big thing that I would say is that a lot of this legislation that you see here on the screen was introduced by some of our state service caucus members, which is really, really exciting as well, because again, they really found that their engagement with that group helped give them some inspiration on what to do. A couple things that I would highlight here, things that did pass. So Maryland strengthening Department of Service and Civic Innovation several years ago when Governor Moore took over, and in Maryland, he had a service initiative as one of his big priorities, and legislation moved through their legislature in order to create this Department of Service and Civic Innovation. This bill was kind of a cleanup bill, so of just kind of like things that they needed to fix in kind of the work. And there in Maryland, they have AmeriCorps via the commission. They have what's called the service year option, which is based for 18 to 24-year-olds. And it's really focused on grabbing people right out of high school, if possible, and getting them into service positions. And there's a lot of wraparound services that they provide the young people that are in that program. They also have the Maryland Corps, which is actually created under a previous administration and never been funded. But Maryland Corps now receives funding, and basically it's a state-based AmeriCorps type program, but it's for any age range. So it's not just limited to the 18 to 24-year-olds kind of thing. So they've got that. Let's see here. Some of the other ones. West Virginia reorganized state departments, they moved the commission. It's not that big of a deal. But it's something that, again, the commission was mentioned in legislation kind of thing. So that helps increase awareness. And then we also saw in Colorado credit for apprenticeships towards associate's degrees. So that's something that the commission is really excited about and worked on as well, as a way to try to have it as part of the partnership that they have with the community colleges in the state. And then another one here in Iowa, work service requirements for assistance programs. So this actually was introduced in the Iowa legislature before those workforce or those work service requirements were passed by Congress this summer. So this is really, and the commission worked hard to really make sure that this was shaped in a way that was going to be productive and not really burdensome for the nonprofit sector in particular, related to having to do service in order to get assistance such as SNAP, et cetera. So again, you'll see there, again, a lot of states have various things. Again, here too, Massachusetts has made some progress on the state hiring incentive and retirement credit for service years. It's also interesting because Massachusetts is one of our nonprofit commissions. So the fact that they're actually working on legislation that's related to state employment, even though they're a nonprofit, I think is interesting, but it's something that's been really important to them as well. And then also too, I'm sorry, Utah. So they have their state-funded service fellowship. So kind of similar to it was modeled on what was been done in Maryland. And so they actually expanded that as well. So they will have additional state funding for that moving forward. So, but kind of just get a sense here on what's happening. I will say with North Dakota, it actually, there was actually a lot of support for this legislation. It got kind of tied up in a battle in the legislature. So it wasn't because of its merits, because it flew through committee, et cetera, flew through the House, but there was some politicking going on the Senate floor. So that's why it didn't pass, but they are planning to reintroduce it in the future as well. So any questions about any of what I just shared with you on this, especially on the state policy front? Any clarifications I can provide to you? Okay. All right. Well, so with that, as Carrie mentioned at the onset, what we wanted to do today is just kind of give you some context again, about what we're seeing in other states. And certainly knowing too that you all have put together legislative proposals previously and kind of tried to work them through the system and on the administration side. But just really, curious, like what resonates with you all? Like, what do you think when you think about advancing the work of OregonServes and for programming throughout the state? Are there particular pieces here that you see that you think, oh, wow, like that would be really, really valuable or something that would really help us advance our work? I'm curious if folks have any kind of initial reactions to that or things that you've done in the past that you think we really need to make another run at that.
Thanks, Kara. This is extremely helpful and also really cool to see what other places across the country are doing. Does anybody have any thoughts? Get this conversation going. See that a couple of people have to drop out for other meetings. Totally get it. Thank you for your time, friends.
This is Carrie. I have a few thoughts.
Go for it, Carrie.
Well, I'll share like what we have tried already that didn't work, and then what I think is interesting to pursue. But we've tried the in-state tuition. Didn't go through, but we do have a concept on that. We tried the additional funding of the education award, so the state ed award, and also oh, the match for the education award, yeah. And then also the removal of state income tax on the education award, and to be on a high note, that one we got through, and became only the 6th commission to get that through. So it's we've tried some things and not all have gone through, but that one was really great to go through. I think for the current landscape, that anything that has like a price tag on it, that's asking for funding or asking for a position is just such a like unlikely thing, right? It I think that a few of those things, if it has to do with funding, if it's a private funding adventure to pursue, that's a little bit different, right? Um, and I think especially like if there's like a huge gap, like I think of like that volunteer piece as being such an obvious like, potential package to say like, hey, here's all these resources we could deploy that like support all of this. But we have this need. And then the other thing I just wanted to say is that what stands out to me though is like being almost feels like a little easier, and that maybe gets us again like kind of a foothold to like do some of the other work we want to do, are the things that are almost more like technical fixes or like technical pursuits, like the having in statute that we have a designated representative role on specific things, right? Like WTDB or even others, maybe, I don't know. And then alumni hiring preferences. I know that everybody knows state hiring priority, I've been talking about for years. We don't have our own concept written, but I'm pretty familiar with it through being on the state policy pros group that Casey, who was with Ask, was running. And I think that seems like something when we're talking about workforce development and talent retention in the state, that almost seems like one that might be worth thinking about. And I'm thinking about things that don't even necessarily have to be like, oh, we need to get that turned into the hack by the 31st of this month. These are things that maybe are pursuits, with outside champions and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of the stuff that stands out for me.
Thanks, Carrie.
Yeah.
Daniel, I see your hand up.
Thanks for getting the ball rolling, Carrie, because I was still trying to absorb all the info that was presented, but because you got the ball rolling, it made me think of other things. But I definitely agree with you on the sentiment of anything that's going to cost money is probably not a good idea, both on the state and federal landscape.
And I would say take away money. Sorry, I just want to say
Yes, and
really
that's what I was
fast.
excuse me. That's what I was gonna add as well is um I'm sure there's some things that would be more successful than others, but anything that removes revenue from the state of Oregon's current budget forecast, probably not going to go through. The one that I'm thinking, I'm like, there's a gray zone is in the near future, I think we could pursue the removal of state income tax on education service awards. That's a thing, right? Because we did,
That's the one that we already did in 22.
but didn't
Or
we remove it from living allowances, not educational awards?
other way around.
We removed it from education awards, but they're federally is still taxed on ed awards, and then we have not pursued removing it on the living allowance.
Gotcha.
The state
Okay.
tax, yeah. So
We did try to, Daniel, what you might be thinking of is we did try to increase the living allowance, but
Yeah, and
couldn't
there we
because
go.
of
Yeah,
the
I think that's where I was
service tier maximum.
crossing my wires, but yeah, anything that's like regular like revenue for the state of Oregon, I think is a little bit harder to touch. The education award, I think we made a good case for it where we said like we don't know when like someone will cash in on this, so it's not a consistent or like stable form of income for you anyway. But I am right there with you, Carrie, where I think financial is gray territory, both like spending and or like bringing it in as a receivable. Um, Technical seems a lot more doable, and I think it can advance some of those key focus areas that you were mentioning. Like if we establish a little bit more clear like technical language, then um, collaboration could be a lot more easier. The one thing I'll say, and this isn't because I have an idea, but if we were to pursue anything that is like a fiscal impact or anything like that, legislators for some reason they'll budge to the idea of like a pilot program to where you're saying this will cost us but one time so we can explore whether this is a good idea or not a good idea, or they love making pilots of things to see like will it cost money, but they like don't bat an eye that like it costs money to run a pilot program. But just want to add that into there as well, where we can, if needed, yes, they love to ask for studies, or they're like, here's one-time funding to study or one-time funding to pilot this to see if it'll cost more money, if it's effective, etc. So that's like a tool in our disposal if we were to pursue anything that's like fiscally related. But I do think we could lean more on like um, the technical side of things, like Carrie mentioned. And then I really like the idea of um, focusing a little bit more on like that service to career pathway and emboldening like this is a workforce recruitment tool. Some of the things that we would be able to do passing legislation, I just to confirm, Carrie, like the what is it called? The hiring preferences for like alumni. If we were to pass that, that would only be specific to state employment, correct?
I mean, I think I have seen where it has said any government position.
Okay.
But do we have, is that how it works for us though, that that is like an authority for any local, state and local government office can be put in as state statute or rule or whatnot? I don't know.
I thought it was the case that federally you already get
Just
alumni.
Vista is the only
Vista.
alumni that gets that.
Well, props to us, I guess.
Federally.
Vista being weird. Okay.
But I feel like, and Kyra, yeah, probably knows, but I feel like I've seen it written that it's for any government entity in a state, but I'm not positive if that's like an authority or scope that is,
Yeah,
if that's
I think
how it's
that's where
done
I'm
here.
stuck
But
on
Kyra,
too.
do you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will vary state to state because I think everyone's employment laws are different too on like the scope of something too. like, does the state of Oregon, if they put something in place, does that authority
Does that tell Multnomah County what to do? Kind of a thing.
The other thing I'll just say quickly too on the alumni hiring preferences piece. So as Carrie mentioned, it's just at the federal level, it's just for Vista right now. The Biden administration issued an executive order in January of this year that extended that hiring preference to all streams of service. So AmeriCorps State and National seniors. So they dropped that like on January 10th. And of course, the executive order was rescinded on January 21st. So we had it for like 10 days, but that is something that is no longer. So we will, on the federal side, we would need a president to either do the executive order route or ideally actually just get it in statute kind of thing. And that's something certainly that, is under consideration for the reintroduction of the PSA Act. Although there's kind of the Republican committee members are hesitant to do anything that talks about growing the federal bureaucracy, as I mentioned earlier. So the idea of giving hiring preferences for more individuals into the federal government is not really something that is particularly of interest. And so I don't think we will actually see that in the final version, but there has been conversation about that again at the federal level. So
that's interesting, Kyra.
That's what I was thinking also, is that it's I saw your comment. I totally agree, Carrie, on like this could be a way to like bring in a base and then they can support in like future stuff as well, or like even help support this. Like we could use their help, and like the language that we would use if we were to pursue like a workforce specific strategy with like hiring incentives in the state, what language we could use so that it encompasses folks that did like an AmeriCorps program, but that also did a is it the Youth Corps program that is also in the HEC or Oregon Workforce Investments Office. But like all of those programs where they're core type, service type, you did it in the state of Oregon, you dedicated a year and you served. How can we return that? And I mean, I think we don't have that sentiment here where we want a reduction in state volume. But what we do have, and it's like a, what's it called? Like a dilemma, a paradox dilemma, where I've seen the state workforce like job like portal. There's many jobs out there that have yet to be filled. And then we're balancing this like budget ask where I'm like, we're trying to funnel so many people into like maybe like state government jobs because like they are familiar, they're prepared, they're trained, and then we keep getting hit with like these budget challenges. And so then state agencies have been like cut positions or like departments completely disappear. And so it's this weird cycle of like we're incentivizing people to like hire and go work for a place where we actually don't know if they can be there forever. And is that actually helpful? So it's like it's a more of a moral dilemma, more less than a technical one, because I think we could pass it. I think on paper it hits all the marks of people are dedicating, like choosing to dedicate like a year of service here in this state. How do we retain that talent and like continue building off of what they've already learned? I think that could be us. Yep, yep. We're also up with that. We can't use an AmeriCorps member to like as a placeholder for someone who doesn't have enough money to pay for a full-time staff member as well.
Yeah, like if there's like staff laid off or whatnot, they wouldn't be able to be like, oh, we can have like a less expensive version or something like that. But we can approach it as like if you have lower staff capacity or positions right now and work to be done that was not yet assigned or is additional work. And I think that that's where we would, that's like where maybe some of that like climate stuff is at. But yeah, you can approach it like that and add capacity within those state government agencies and so forth.
I'm curious, Kyra, is there, for the states that have that alumni hiring preference legislation, is there a deadline, or not a deadline, an expiration? Or is like somebody who served 50 years ago, does that hiring preference still apply to them if they're applying for a job?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Sarah. I mean, it depends state to state. I mean, I think when we like when we were working on this in California, we basically said any AmeriCorps or Peace Corps alum like whenever they did their service kind of thing, then they would be eligible for that kind of thing. So, and specifically the Peace Corps was included as well. But but for others, maybe it is like in recent, because in really trying, if they're trying to attract younger talent to state government, that you're probably, doing it within the last 5 to 10 years makes more sense than, for example, it being someone who, served 30 years ago type of thing, right? So,
Yeah, that makes
yeah.
sense. I
At
also
the
had
federal,
a go ahead, Daniel.
I was the federal level, I remember because served in a Vista role, so I remember getting the email about the incentive, the non-competitive eligible blah 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 at the federal level. That one, I think, does that one expire, like the one at the federal level for Vista members?
I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look. I don't really know, to be honest with you.
I
I should
got
know
all the
that.
emails at the same time, like, here's your education award, here's like
Hmm.
what's next. And I know that some things have limits, some don't. Like the education service is like the 7-year thing. So yeah, I wonder if that exists. But back to you, Sierra. I know that you had something to say.
Yeah, I also don't remember. Oh, I was thinking about the education award again, and this is a conversation that we'd had at one point, and that is modernizing the education award. And curious if we decided to pursue something like that again, would that have any fiscal responsibility or fiscal what's the word I want burden? And have other states? I didn't see that on your list, which kind of surprises me. Like, and to clarify for the rest of folks who may not remember those conversations, the idea of modernizing the education award would be to allow folks to use that money to like buy a new laptop because they're going back to school, or buy a car so that they can transport, or whatever that might look like.
They can actually do that, like laptop and stuff like that, as education like components, but supplements. But they can't do stuff like yeah, like you like say you got a job in a new city and you wanted to use it for like your first month's like down payment and rent or something, or you wanted to do something like you did get a job based off service or whatever, and you do need like a car or something like that. That's the kind of stuff. Yeah, I think we were hoping that maybe they would expand it to, but I don't know if
Yeah,
there's
I mean,
been.
I think when we see the PSA Act come out, we will see some expansion of allowable uses for the education award. I just don't know like how much, right? Kind of like how far they're going to go, kind of thing. And I think that's part of the negotiations, but definitely the understanding there about needing to make it more usable for folks so that people actually do use the benefit that they've earned, right? Kind of thing, rather than like just letting it expire on the National Service Trust. So, and a lot of it where I think we're going to, again, see probably the most thing is just going to be the flexibility to transfer it to anybody you want to, probably more that way. And then again, some stuff related to apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeships stuff. Like I think that would be there as well. But probably much beyond those two things, I doubt at this point in time. Like I think that there would be an opportunity to go further in a large reauthorization bill. But probably again, they're really thinking about it right now as it being a mini reauthorization bill. So they're not going to want to put too many provisions in it, unfortunately. So
Yeah. And then I'm thinking, well, is the biggest consideration with like use of an educational service award, is it administrative consideration? Because like um if you receive it as an education award, if you choose that option, like doesn't that get sent to a higher education service institution that you're choosing so that it would pay? Otherwise, if you want the cash, right, to get sent to you, it's less than, but that's how they send it to you. But I'm thinking that's the same thing where if we want to extend the education service award for housing, right, like that's an example we mentioned. How is it that AmeriCorps or CNCS like can send the money not to you, but to where you want it to land, and who's going to administer that, who's going to manage that, how do you make sure? I think it's a lot of the not like, is this a good idea? It's like, how would this work? Kind of thing. But
Right.
I think the things that you mentioned are like steps. The one thing I've learned in the policy world is sometimes you like take an inch so you can go a mile. And I think I'm really interested in hearing like how those plan out. You also mentioned something like the pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs. I think we could maybe embed those or at least plant the seeds in like this workforce conversation, this service to career pathway conversation that we're kind of pursuing, to say like, what if a pre-apprenticeship credential maybe looks like a during a year of AmeriCorps, if someone's doing like a very administrative position or anything, like they can get a certificate of some sort, right? In like public administration, you can get a certificate in that, and that kind of like adds to your resume. Some things that other people would have to pursue on their um, like their own initiative, but like how do we embed that those certifications like within the programs so that as they're doing them, hey, you're collecting this as well, which is beneficial for you. Like we know that you're able to do all these things, but now here's something on paper that you can add to it. But um I'm hearing from this conversation that that's kind of where we're leaning into is like technical workforce, like service to career, kind of like um planning per se. Like we don't have to implement anything, but we can say like, what if these commissions talk to each other or these agencies talk to each other? And what if we have a good an agreement of like what that means? But I think we're if we pursue any legislation in this upcoming session, I think that's probably our best bet of where we lean into. But I also want to hear what other folks have as thoughts and or if the commission in as a whole has any other ideas for this upcoming session as well.
That was a good summary, Daniel. Do we have any more questions or comments or any more conversation we want to have around this right now?
I actually have a question for Carrie. Carrie, in the NGA-based conversations that you've been having with the work in Oregon, has there been any legislative engagement with that, or has that just been all internal to the administration?
The NGA stuff, we haven't really dug into that. I mean, we just actually asked for a 3-month extension to that for Amber to do some of that work where we might hear more around like opportunities for this or for legislative stuff, but we haven't gotten that far in our conversation much because well, I'm gonna say something a little bit different, but because the federal actions kind of like made that a little weird for us. We've had some. My caveat to that is that there's been like pitches made around like, hey, the normal asks that are going to happen. Maybe we could have some additional asks that says, funds for service to career stuff, but the and Jeremy could talk maybe a little bit about this, but nothing like super specific because it is kind of, I think, the general idea within the department and within our agency that there's not going to be much that's going to go through
Right.
from the heck. Because our process is we submit it internally. If our, bosses basically think that aligns, they'll run it up and then that goes before the heck. If the heck, leadership thinks that it aligns, they would maybe, and they would want to put effort behind it, they would maybe then put that on the slate for the commission to approve, and then the commission would approve things to move forward and basically put that in their recommendations, and then we would wait to see if it made it into the governor's recommended budget. It is the case that there's like a program within OE that still is, trying to get sustainable funding, and that tends to end up being a priority, and the rest of us it's hard to get past that. So it's been like, yeah, here's some ideas, but also there's kind of already some priorities identified that we likely, if we wanted to put something forward, would need to do it outside of that process.
Right. And so that's helpful. The reason I was asking, just like if there had been legislative connection related to some of the NGA related work. And I recognize that you are a little bit behind where you want to be.
Well,
that
and
just might
also
be
our
helpful.
governors, like our governor contact left office and then they've refocused their priorities in the governor office. So we're not as in front of their face on that either.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That makes sense too. I was just thinking if there were though had been some legislative involvement in that, and being able to talk to those folks about some of these ideas might be another way of thinking about it as well, just because I recognize how hard the path forward is going to be going through the official process via the HEC. So, yeah.
All right. What's next on our non-agenda agenda? You have more for us, Kyra?
I don't actually have anything else formal. We wanted to, kind of just talk about what we're seeing across the country and how that might inform your thinking. I mean, Carrie, kind of at this point, it doesn't feel like, I know your deadline is like, what, in a week kind of thing for if you were going to try to push something through.
In 2 weeks, yeah. And it just kind of has to be a draft.
What do you need from us at this point, Carrie?
Well, I think it's just, I think the conversation is around like what we would want to pursue, or if we would want to maybe say we have a few things we want to pursue, but we maybe would want to just follow up and talk about what the timeline would be and whether it would be, that it's something we have to champion outside of the process or whatnot, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie, out of those like technical policy concepts, which one of those do you think would be most doable to draft and or pursue in session that are like closer to like less of an idea to more of like a concept itself? But I guess the bigger question is like, do we have anything right now that we can introduce into session, like pop wise or bill wise, that you would feel like 100% confident in pursuing? And if not, I have I have an idea of a way for us to like be involved in the session without championing
Yeah,
legislation itself.
and we can be involved in session and we can champion things, outside of the like needing HEC to sponsor, and
Yeah.
that gives us a lot more time. And I have a feeling that more is going to come up for us, especially after like NGA work, and research and so forth does happen. So I would be perfectly fine if we left this and said, you know what, right now nothing's jumping out, and we're going to continue to talk about it, but we're not going to necessarily try to meet that deadline. But I also, and I think that's probably just going to be the case regardless, but of things. But also when you talk about like, is there anything really easy? I mean, for me, it's the alumni hiring preferences, honestly. And the reason why I think that is because it aligns with strategy 3 that is already happening within the HEC that I'm already on that team for, which has to do with wanting post-secondary learners to be more engaged in solving community problems. That's HEC strategic plan goal, one of the goals. I think that there is obviously like that's a thing, a contained thing for concepts. So this is a little wilding for me to be like, and then let's do something on the side too. But ask for forgiveness later or whatever. But I think that is a way to say, oh, by the way, if you're interested in having more people that are civically engaged or interested in public service and interested in solving problems of their communities, here is a whole group of people who, are receiving all of this professional development and mentoring, and who, we have stats, we have reports that say when employers are asked what they think about when they see AmeriCorps on a resume, they say that I know that that person knows, has experience in team building and conflict resolution and community engagement and partnership building and community problem solving and all of these things. And so I see that being something that would possibly both, I think, potentially have success outside of this process and with a external champion, but I also see where maybe it might have success internally as well. And so there's no, like, it's not seen as a shortcoming to be like, we're not putting together a concept, this year. That's not a thing. You're not looked at as being like, unambitious or whatever it is. This year it's probably more looked at as like slightly realistic. But I think something like that, to me, that feels like something that could be pretty cool. And again, I think it ties into workforce development, it ties into our base, it ties into promotion of AmeriCorps, it ties into, it's a service to career pathway piece. And it's got some, it's play cousins with like some other things that Heck is doing. So
Tell me more about this if we don't do the heck pathway to policy, what's the alternative route that you take? Don't you still have to get the okay from heck? No matter what we do?
it doesn't involve me. It
Gotcha.
involves citizens of the state utilizing their right to do things
Gotcha.
and talk to legislative officials as members that are informed by being on a state board or commission, but not there representing the state board or commission, which is how the state tax bill also ended up being brought up. But yeah, so I mean, I'm just saying like that those are things that
Gotcha.
people are allowed to pursue and get people's interest, and then a legislator is like, oh, that's a good idea.
Gotcha. Because I know that
That's
I mean
as
we've
basic as
done
it gets.
this, yeah, we've done I think we've done it in previous years, but sometimes like was it last one of the past legislative sessions, like we haven't put forth our own, sometimes we do, but what we also do is balance that with like, hey, what else is affecting the world of service and volunteerism, and how do we then, instead of being a champion or a lead, like be a supporter, because it's still as important for us to see this happen or not happen, etc. But we could do that this legislative session as well. And one thing I'd be curious about is legislators are able to, there's a fancy term for it. Is a resolution, is it a basically like legislators, I think, get a certain number of things where like they just talk and like either recognize like organizations or recognize like a project that's going on, but it's like their chance to like address the floor and be like raise awareness about things. I've done this at like CBOs that I'm a part of, like this past legislative session, where we didn't have a specific like immigration services asked, but we wanted it to be recognized on the floor that like, hey, immigration services need to be recognized and we might in the future need to address this, et cetera. But it's a way to like expose, right? A project, an organization, et cetera. But how do we pair that with like, is this our opportunity to like find a champion who could do that for us, to be like, hey, what's the first goal, Carrie? Not the strength of
What's the what?
the first goal that you have.
Strengthening impacts of service.
Is it
Yeah.
strengthening impacts of service? Yes, I think like we can't strengthen something that like we also like people don't know. So like strengthening the impact is like expanding the awareness of that impact of service. And so um we should do some digging to see like who are our, and we've talked about this before, who are our champions in the legislative body, and can we move forward with an action step for some of them, all of them? Because I know we've talked about like let's just meet them, let's write them letters, let's like meet their staff, and if we have luck, could we have one of them read some sort of resolution to say like, hey, in this moment where we are restructuring and rethinking the ways that we do things, we have this tool here at our state and here at the federal level that can advance these type of priorities, and it can address cross agency like collaboration. But this is me saying like, if we're not
Yeah, I know
as
what you mean.
like if we're not doing this like championing and stuff. This is other stuff that we can do while being engaged in session. Because what I don't want is for us to not be engaged at all. I don't think that's the move. So like, what is it that we can do? But I do
Well, and I
like
think
your
another thing
idea.
is, yeah, thinking more about, if we're able to do like days at the Capitol again, we couldn't do that for a long time because of construction. But that, is probably something we would want to think about too. And I think that, I just want to remind you, like with policy, it's not always about legislative concept. It's conversations around like internal policy, policy, with other partners and so forth, things that don't have to be like on the books, you know, right now per se. So that could be something with pursuing a policy and pitching, which I kind of have draft for with the WTDB representation, those sorts of things. So we could say, hey, we want to look at this one thing that is more legislative concept based to actually like make a dent and be successful. But these are the other things that maybe are policies we would look at, because I view it as three things, I guess. A legislative concept, we're not getting any positions right now unless that comes up like from somebody else. Legislative concept, policy, which could be internal or with others, and then oh my gosh, I almost just lost my thought. Oh, private funding, pursual of private funding. Um, I feel like those are kind of the areas to think about, especially like it's so funny because we're having this conversation like asynchronous to like what our actual goal is, what our actual state plan is. So this is kind of, we haven't committed to a state plan set of goals yet. We're just talking about like what is doable or what not. But I do think we have to, like, before we commit to anything big, reference again like go back to what the state goals are going to be, and that's just not going to fit this timeline internally with the hack. It's just not. Because if we're not possibly, if we're going to be looking at drafts over the next month or so, and then maybe even approving a draft in say January or February, probably February. Session starts in February. The deadline is the end of this month, for concepts. So I do think that we're looking at anything beyond something simple like the alumni hiring priority and stuff. We're really looking at like having to do that outside the system or a different way or another session or something. And we already next year, by the end of next year, would have like the deadlines for technical fixes for 2020 something something. Sorry.
2020,
I need
20,
to
yeah.
eat.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
The
The
only other
next
thing that
session.
I don't think we've like voiced out loud, but it's good for us to know that next year's also big election year,
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of legislative body like representatives and senators on that ballot, but we have a governor's election next year as well, right?
Wow.
And
We also have about half of our commission representation, and quite a few people are leaving, and we have quite a few open positions. So we have a lot of opportunity for recruitment and to really think about like champions that way.
yeah, and I think that's why I'm like, let's voice that out loud because it could change like work that we're already doing or work that we're planning to do. And I mean, there's also like, what are the pros of knowing this information? Like, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and if the state of Oregon, how do I say this in a bipartisan way?
On
If
a
the
taped
state
meeting, a
if
taped
if the state of Oregon remains with their current governor, we already know what their priorities are,
Mhm.
and their current platform is to not come up with new priorities, but to, hey, we planted the seeds, elect me again so that I can complete these initiatives that I've already started.
Yes.
Um, I think we should be prepared for all the above, which is like, yeah, let's keep an eye out for like what
Abrupt
other
switch.
priorities are from other candidates. And if the state of Oregon chooses to stay with the same governor that we currently have right now, we already know their plan, etc. So how do we use that to our advantage? But then how do we also prepare if another governor is elected with different priorities? But it's more of like a information based thing. Like let's keep these things on our tabs because it will shape the things that we're going to be doing, and how agencies run and where priorities and funding is allocated. But we do know those, and some of those are, I think you highlighted it on that matrix that you created, where workforce, mental health or behavioral health, and housing are our current governor's top priorities. Um, let's not forget that, and also know that like we could have a completely new governor next year as well. So just like keeping a pulse on that as well, because when you were saying that legislative like policy is like one avenue that we can like move forward priorities in this body that we're in, and then Kyra, you said something where I was like the Biden administration enacted an executive order, but it had like policy impact on. I'm like, does that apply like at a state level where maybe we don't go through the legislative body and instead we partner up with like agency heads or like the governor to like move forward some policy that we're thinking? But I'm
Well,
just
and I will
thinking out
just
loud now.
interject real quick, Daniel, that there are opportunities. Like OHA just got so much funding in the last session for, youth mental behavioral health stuff, that there's possibly like partnerships there. There's the Orvid bill that's going to go through to move that over to ODM, and I'm working on that with RepTran and with ODM, so we are able to put support behind that if that moves forward. And that potentially, that's a place to potentially see a position actually for volunteerism. So there are things for there to be an effort behind that they're not going to be led by us. If strategy 3 goes through, for there to be a civic engagement funding, a position and so forth, and that is the effort to say, hello, we're the State Commission for Civic Engagement, we're literally in your agency. Like, that should be with us. So I want to interject to just to explain, just to mention that, of like, there's many opportunities for us to also be engaged this session, but also not maybe put the effort into leading something, but putting focus into supporting something for people that have a little bit more power, possibly.
Well, and I think too, I mean, I would just, as an outside observer kind of, and as part of this conversation, like I think that, I mean, you all seem to, in our conversation today, have been kind of coalescing kind of these different pieces around the workforce piece. And so I definitely think there's something there. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. But I also think too, Carrie, that like probably like getting through your NGA work and really seeing kind of what surfaces with that as well could really help inform, what something could look like down the road type of thing. You know what I mean? And so I mean, I almost would say, like, before trying to do something like by the end of the year with a large, concept, and maybe it's getting through all of that and really thinking about what would be the workforce components you really would want to see in legislation as part of that, and like taking a little bit more time to kind of like build that out. Having that be informed by the NGA work and the partnerships with other state agencies and all that stuff, and I think then you could have maybe a more comprehensive approach to that, because I would probably personally, I would bundle a lot of these workforce things that we've been talking about today, try to get that into like one rather than doing them as one-offs, even though that might be easier. But I think that it makes it seem more comprehensive and people would see how the pieces fit together differently. Unless, if you're doing more of the one-offs, then it's like less kind of cohesive or comprehensive type of thing. So I mean, I know how difficult it is to move legislation. Like, I totally understand that. But it feels like maybe just a little bit more work and building some of this stuff out would actually lead to a longer, maybe a more successful outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think too that, I still go back to thinking about broadening our outreach and broadening our who we've got in our pocket as champions. And I go back to thinking about those conversations with the universities and colleges and others and saying, like, here's this benefit to you, and really doing some concept development with partnership development with them, where they are leading something like that, where they're leading an initiative, where they see the benefit in implementing something like that, or pursuing policy with them. through things like schools for national service or through employers of national service and stuff like that. Or, you know, down the road as a legislative concept, and just looking at those opportunities rather than always thinking about it like, you know, through the hack and so forth. I guess where I'm kind of landing is thinking, I mean, this is I've written down quite a few things, and we've talked about quite a few things that I think are good for us to pursue. They're just not on this end of the month timeline for like an internal legislative concept issue, as far as I can tell. I think that something I could do is take the draft that I have right now and flesh that out a little bit more with some of the specifics that have come up, specifically with some of the things that I think engaged us and got us excited out of the state pot priority list or state policy list that you mentioned. The cross representation from other boards, the you know, something that maybe is related to like policy around like, so if we do see that 7-year window be reduced, you know, how where what might we take that conversation to local universities and colleges and say like, hey, this window is shrinking, like get it get these, you know, this enrollment while you can, sort of a thing. The hiring eligibility priority stuff, I feel like there's other avenues, other places for us to build on those and enact some pretty impactful big changes. So I could take that draft and put together a little bit more, you know, right now it's kind of like vague concepts, but a little bit more specifics with some outcomes, because that's the big column that's missing right now on that slide. But you know, I only had so much time. I appreciate that you liked what I did have. And then just come back with that and maybe tag that for, this is like policy with so and so, or this is like a private funding, you know, adventure, da 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 da, and kind of be able to have a little bit more like viewpoint of the like roadmap there. I'm just throwing out jargon at this point, maps and viewpoints, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And bring that to like the commission board meeting, which by the way, we're going to be sending out the poll to figure out like what our next calendar will look like. But that could be a path if we are comfortable with saying today, we're not turning in something by the 31st. We're going to continue to research, plan, identify other champions. Maybe somehow we interact or intersect into that session. But well,
Yeah,
this is technical
I
coming
think
up,
the
but you know what I mean.
keyword is like, we're at least within like the world of the agency that we're in, etc. We won't be leading, but like, what if they like someone else within the heck or another like sub department like does submit something, we're like, we will support, but like leading like something, us submitting something within that pathway and then saying like, we'll collaborate with others. I think that's clear, Carrie. Like where our path forward is more on the, we're going to look into this more and we are happy to support other things that we see. Like, yes, like we can't leak this, but we will support you if you pursue this.
When will that list of draft concepts from all HEC agencies be available?
I don't know. So good question. I know I've got that somewhere, but I think that it's somewhere in the first quarter of the year. I keep in my head, I keep confusing the fact that the February session is a short. I don't know why I keep doing that. But yeah, so it'll be this next year that all of those will be developed, and I believe they have to be turned in to DAS like by April or something. So it's in the first quarter, I believe, that then it starts like January, February is kind of like fleshing things out and you know, and so forth. And then I think it's probably like, I don't know, March or something that goes before that commission, but I'd have to look into it. And not to put anybody on the spot, but Jeremy, do you have thoughts? Do you want to share? Is there anything that you want to speak about or that is resonating with you?
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. And thanks all for being here today. It was some of the thoughts that are coming through. The youth team, as Carrie kind of mentioned, had submitted a couple legislative concepts that are more sustainability focused in nature. And then there is a larger workforce package. It sounds like that the Office of Workforce Investments is working on in collaboration with
Future Ready.
Future Ready. I don't know what's actually in that. I haven't heard anything in that. That's being kind of drafted at more of the executive director kind of role. So there is that. But the things that do stick out to me in the conversation today really are around program alignments, and maybe they're not specific ledge concepts, but they're internal policies that we can certainly start to strengthen up and collaborate on, which could inform future legislative support. And it really does kind of come back to the conversation for me, connecting the data points and the metrics around the service to career options and what we have available to us, which is really kind of helpful to just start the collaboration piece, and figure out how we can play out together in that space. And the hiring preference is something that the youth workforce team has been hearing from the programs they work from for a long time about how do we make impact into tangible pathways into state service or local government service. They're doing the work, but they're not eligible for it because of the education requirements that are immediately put upon those people who are serving in that, who may or may not go down the path towards that educational path, but they're qualified and they're doing the positions within that space. And so
I just real quick want to say, I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is where we often may have an age overlap in who we're working with and serving, but AmeriCorps members do tend to more have like bachelor's degrees, and then they're like, or, getting their awards for their master's, whereas I think that the Youth Works programs tend to have more like certification or apprenticeship or like licenses or experience rather than like the bachelor degree, and so I hadn't thought about that distinction. Sorry, keep going, but I just
it's just
noting.
the thing we hear from the professionals in the field is it's not a clean path into their positions, and so they may navigate, they may go post-secondary, but it may not be their first intended path. And so how do we support alternative paths that are outside of the, I guess, the traditional education system placement model? And so those are the things that really are sticking out to me from what you all have shared in conversation, where there's some alignment conversations that absolutely make sense between the work that we're doing. And I also think the embedding of commission members within the different boards, just to keep people in opportunities and space, especially if they're governor appointed, really helps build upon the alignment considerations. And so we're not working in individual siloed experiences. There is some cohesiveness in that space. So those are the three areas. I mean, you've all hit upon them earlier on, but those are the ones we're really thinking about, especially as we think that the challenge for funding may not be there. I told Carrie this earlier. I did try to put in a proposal that from the youth force team to kind of align the service to career and climate resiliency within our portfolio that would benefit us all while working on sustainability. And unfortunately, that didn't rise up to the level of priority for our team and our immediate kind of priority. But at least it was put out there, and they understand that we're starting to think about that, and we're starting to think about what alignment could look like. What does state service look like within a core programming, and what's its role in workforce development, and showing that one program is not always the answer, but there is multiple solutions and strategies that we can put into place. And some of the other states are starting to see the benefit of a blended portfolio, especially as economic times are challenging. So yeah, so I'll just stop there.
I would offer, Jeremy, that I think that might be a good thing to maybe like come to one of our future commission meetings and talk about and share, because I do think that proposal, that packet, can be translated into a philanthropic ask, into a vision to a private funder. Please don't, move to trash on your computer. Like let's see where that might be, that some of the work is already done for a proposal that we would put forth to creating, this kind of ecosystem by private funds. And or other state agencies who are like, you get a lot of money, let us in on this. Like, this is how we're helping you meet your goals, you know?
Thank you for all that, Jeremy. We have about 7 minutes left. Are there any other final thoughts, final questions, final things that you need? Carrie, do you feel like you've got a plan? You feel comfortable with it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I start vacation today, technically. At the end of the day today, although I'll be doing a little bit of work. And if we really wanted something turned in by the 31st, I would have done that, but it sounds like we're not going to. And no, I did not direct us any which way based on any bias of my vacation. You know, I
I think
am. I
this
would
is
have done
a
it.
smart, strategic
Yeah, I
decision.
would have done it anyways, but
You're great, Carrie.
I think yeah, I might do a little bit of work on this just so I yeah, well, it's fresh. But I think I have a pretty clear path forward. I think, you know, we'll be looking at getting meetings scheduled so that we can follow up on this. I definitely want to, you know, talk further with Jeremy around some of that too, and bringing some stuff forward. Um but I think, yeah, I think we have a good idea. I thank you so much, Kyra, for like all the context and background, everything you've been bringing, guiding us, nudging us in these conversations. Um, I yeah, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. There was something I was going to say around next steps, but I'll just leave it at that.
Carrie, out of curiosity, who's the legislative analyst, director, coordinator, and or at the heck?
Well, there's different ones, and OE has its own, and it's Sarah. I'm sorry, I can't think of her name right now, but it's another Sarah that replaced like the old Sarah. Um,
It's someone we haven't met before, right?
I haven't had a lot of engagement with them, and you all haven't. Sarah means you all haven't met them. Maybe we could invite them though to a
Yeah, that was
meeting.
going to be my ask, is if you could invite them to a future public policy committee. Just I think with no other agenda than just to say like hello, to establish a relationship, and then when the time comes, we've already met to like when we make an ask.
Yeah.
And it's like I know that on your team, like you are our like everything person. So knowing that like, hey, these other people also get paid to like do some other stuff that could support would be great. Like, because I'm thinking like if we had asked you, can you give us an entire directory of every single legislator and their chief of staff? That's a pretty daunting task, and I'm sure other people already have like trackers, etc. But knowing who
We have one from a couple of years ago.
yeah, I think we had one, right? And then
Mhm.
No,
we're about to update it.
we get the directory from Ask.
That's what it is. Yeah.
There we go. And then like
That
And
way,
doesn't
like
it?
take the federal one, and then I always add, yeah, like that
yeah,
state
but like
tracker.
some of those stuff to be like, hey, like
That needs
can you
updated.
do this? Like we're not only benefiting, but like any agency or any sub agency within your agency is going to benefit. Like do you have this available? But like it'd be great to just say hello, to know
Mhm.
like the people doing
Yeah.
some of that work out
If
there.
I go, oh shoot, yeah, add that another to-do list item I need to remember to do.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
You
This
could
is
direct
just
your staff to do it.
my huge stuff.
You could delegate.
I wish I could outsource a little bit more. This is something I just remembered that I do want to mention really quick, is that Mary Grusel is back. I just got
Oh,
notice that so AmeriCorps did just announce that they're putting people back in the ex officio positions for commissions and boards, and Mary is still around, so Mary will be our person. Just wanted to mention that to you. And also just for the new year, we have a lot of recruitment to do to build out our numbers for our commission. And I think that is going to be a really important project as well, to do overlapping around both like the goals, but also like bringing people in that represent these areas that we're talking about, and especially of diverse political parties.
great, Carrie.
And we'll do all that after the holidays.
Yes, and then yes, in the meantime, we'll keep an eye out for the scheduling surveys from the admin team. If there are no more final questions or comments, All right, I'm gonna close the meeting here at 1:58 p.m. Give you 2 minutes back. Thank you for a great conversation. Thank you for all of your time, Kyra. Happy holidays to all of you. I hope you have a wonderful, peaceful rest of your year.